Hello, I'm Dr. William Schlosser, Washington State University, School of the Environment. This is my classroom.
Animal and plant populations exist in the environments where they developed responses to their restrictive environments. These ecosystems establish the basis for biotic adaptations to thrive and survive. This is what makes each individual a representation of successes they embody. Along this developmental path, each species has interacted with others in their space. Sometimes these interactions develop into a series of genetic characteristics to allow species to fill their niche, many times to develop their place in that niche. Other times, interspecies interactions lead to mutualistic relationships where each population takes on a role that benefits them and the ones they interact with. Each interaction resolves with long-term genetic characteristics passed as their genetic code. Successful offspring will make the next generation using those heritable genetic characteristics. Success is passed by survivors, thriving in the restrictive environments where they live, with action seen as movement through time and space. These interactions are best studied with populations. This is where organisms live in the environment where cohorts exist. It is within plant populations, animal populations, and of course the living space where they all interact. The development of all organisms is pitched into the context of breeding populations, thriving where they can be born, grow, reproduce, and perpetuate. Dispersal of species refers to both the movement of individuals, that is, animals, plants, fungi, bacteria, and more, from their birth site to their breeding site, naming their natal dispersal. Population dispersal operates when individual organisms leave the space that they have occupied previously, or in which they were born, and settle in new areas. Natal dispersal is the first movement of an organism from its birth site to the site where it first attempts to breed. Bering Strait separates present-day Russia and Far East on the left from northwestern Alaska on the right. Separated by only 90 kilometers or 55 miles, Bering Strait is named for Danish explorer Vitus Bering, who spotted the Alaskan mainland in 1741 while leading an expedition of Russian sailors. Today, the straits are a barrier of travel where only ocean vessels and jets can traverse. But that is today, and only 11,700 years ago, while the most recent ice age was at its apex, sea levels were 300 foot lower than seen today. At that time, the Bering boreal forest linked these lands. We will talk soon about the exchange of wildlife between these land masses, but know that today we still see descendants of moose, elk, deer, wolves, and people who crossed these lands. This is a critical linkage to understand how species and population dispersal enables change. While it is difficult to determine exactly how many Aboriginal people lived in North America before Columbus discovered America, estimates range from a low of 2.1 million to a high of about 18 million. Indigenous people north and south were displaced, died of disease, and were killed by Europeans through slavery, rape, and war. In 1491, about 145 million people lived in northwestern hemisphere. By 1691, the population of indigenous Americans had declined by 90 to 95%. When the Europeans arrived, carrying germs which thrived in dense, semi-arid urban populations, the indigenous people of the Americas were effectively doomed. They had never experienced smallpox, measles, or flu before, and the viruses tore through the continent. According to human mitochondrial DNA haplogroups, the Beringia glacial refugium allowed the flushing of people between these continents in both directions. Distribution takes on a new meaning as these human genomes were exposed to different restrictive environments. Now, back to present day. The prairie once spread across 1.5 million square kilometers of North America's Great Plains, but less than 2% of native prairie remains today. Settlers had to learn how to farm on the Great Plains. The soil was held together by grass roots. Settlers were called sod busters, because they had to break through the sod to plant crops. There was not a lot of wood, so settlers used sod to build their homes. Wow, the government was committed to supporting those who decided to make the move. Settlers from Europe seeking freedom also saw an opportunity in the move to the Great Plains. The move to the Great Plains presented an opportunity for European immigrants to escape poverty in their home countries. The California Gold Rush began January 24, 1848, through about 1855, when gold was found by James W. Marshall at Sutter's Mill in Coloma, California. News of the gold brought approximately 300,000 people to California from the rest of the United States and abroad. What growing plant materials and reproductive animals were transplanted into the environment, and which have continued to populate this region since that time? This was a genetic distribution with long-lasting implications for California and everywhere the settlers passed through on their trek, and then where they eventually landed. We call this distribution, but we see it through movement. The demand for protections of the future distributions of biodiversity has triggered an upsurge in modeling at the crossroads between ecology and evolution. Despite the enthusiasm around these so-called biodiversity models, most approaches are still criticized for not integrating key processes known to shape species ranges and community structure. Developing an integrative modeling framework for biodiversity distribution promises to improve the reliability of predictions and to give better understanding of the ecoevolutionary dynamics of species and communities under changing environments. To understand present states and potential changes in dispersal traits, we must evaluate the selective pressures that underlie their evolution. These pressures arise from the interactions between individuals of the dispersing populations and their environment. Because dispersal often occurs in spatially heterogeneous environments, the resulting population dynamics and ecological feedbacks tend to be intricate. The first simulations of species responses to global changes were provided by species distribution models, called SDMs, developed to project large-scale species distributions from correlations between occurrence and environmental conditions. Even though they are often nicknamed niche models, SDMs are only weakly connected to niche theory, since key processes and elements evolved in the niche's contemporary definitions are explicitly modeled. For instance, SDMs do not model population growth rate, source sink dynamics, or competition. As an alternative, hybrid models that include basic mechanisms such as dispersal and demography into SDMs have provided more realism and better predictive performance than traditional SDMs. However, like SDMs, they inherently suffer from their weak underpinnings by ecological theory. Despite being closely allied to niche theory, hybrid models do not account for biotic interactions like competition, positive interactions, or trophic relationships, and only rarely do they include the capacity of species to adapt to novel conditions. Biodiversity, ecosystem functioning, ecosystem services, and human well-being are widely used terms, though how they are defined, unfortunately, changes among sectors, sometimes generating confusion. Biodiversity is most defined as the variability among living organisms from all sources, including taxonomic, phylogenetic, and functional diversity and the ecological complexes of which they are part. Every ecosystem features key functions such as primary production and nutrient cycling, which give rise to ecosystem services that improve human well-being, such as the provisioning of clean water, fertile soils, timber, and capture fisheries benefits. Physiological requirements for plant survival are considered under the headings of resource availability, which involves biological properties such as nitrogen and carbon balance, and can be differentiated from purely physical limits to viability such as heat, cold, and drought tolerance. A remarkable difficulty in measuring these limits by means of observational studies is that individuals at range margins may be exposed to special environmental conditions because of relationships with their neighbors, seen as facilitation. Well-established theoretical background, seen here through metapopulation theory, accounts for physiological constraints, dispersal, biotic interactions, and evolution to be integrated into simple biodiversity models. There are 5 main modes of seed dispersal: gravity, wind, ballistic, water, and by animals. Some plants make serotinous cone seeds and disperse their seeds in response to an environmental stimulus, like through forest fire. Dispersal involves the letting go or detachment of the diaspore from the parent plant. Interplay among major processes may cause non-trivial effects on species range dynamics and community patterns. Conceptual representation of ecological filters select species from the global pool and shape local communities. Filters operate at different dimensional geographic space and ecological space. Main processes shaping species range dynamics and community structure and their direct, A through E, and indirect, F through K, on the filtering process. Interactions between abiotic environment, physiology, and dispersal can also be important. Following this conceptual diagram, the selection of species composing logical communities first depends on the dispersal capacity, A, and their biogeographic history, B. These factors define the geographic range a species can reach in time, and thus under environmental changes, its ability to track favorable conditions. The niche filter selects species that can establish and maintain positive population growth under the given environmental conditions. This selection process is driven by the match between species physiology, C, on the one hand, and the environmental conditions shaped by the abiotic environment such as climate or habitat quality, E, and by inter- and intra-specific biotic interactions, D, on the other. Biotic interactions may act by reducing available resources or ameliorating harsh conditions. They may also influence demographic rates due to trophic or mutualistic interactions. Finally, evolutionary adaptation affects the geographic limits of species ranges by shaping species physiology, G, dispersal characteristics, F, and biotic interactions, H. Pulls, pushes, puts, and takes are all part of this interaction web. Because plants cannot walk around and take their seeds to other places, they have developed other methods to genetically disperse, that is, to move their seeds. Experimental studies analyzing the abiotic environment assess boundaries of species habitat to critically assess and model their physiological responses to environmental changes. Dispersal involves the letting go or detachment of a diaspore from the main parent plant, though wind can be instrumental to breeding success. Plants such as the pond iris grow in or near fresh water. The seed pods break open when they ripen. Those which fall into the water float away. The seeds may be dispersed long distances. They can either germinate in the water or when they become stranded in the mud. These responses have genetically evolved in response to this restrictive environment. The importance and the effect of dispersal on species distribution may vary with community composition and the resulting biotic interactions. A striking example concerns the North American tree species Prunus serotina, black cherry. Seeds are dispersed by birds and can land far away from the parent trees and thus escape the soil pathogens placed by the adults. These soil pathogen-released seeds have theoretically a better chance to establish, but they will miss symbiotic mutualists, such as arbuscular and ectomycorrhizal fungi that are accumulated around the parent plants. Consider the influence of this shape-shifting coyote through the ecosystem. A coyote is a vector of population spread for juniper. They are co-reliant on the biotic and abiotic environments where they are found. Remove coyotes, or limit their range, and you will also affect the juniper populations in these same areas. Coyotes eat a large variety of food. They will hunt rodents, rabbits, fish, frogs, insects, and snakes. They'll also forage for plants like grasses, fruits, and seeds. Coyotes will sometimes, but not often, attack deer if they're in a pack. But because of their small size, this is rare. Coyote main diet comes from rodents like mice, rats, squirrels, and chipmunks. This is an image I want to look at again. Remember, I stated that coyotes are carnivores, not omnivores. Well, this scene is repeated in many cases as people talk about this shapeshifter. This canine is pulling fruit because it has a sweet nectar, and its sweet tooth wants a fix. There are marginal energetic benefits for the coyote, but that bush is getting the benefit of seed dispersal to be transported in the coyote's gut to a new planting place. There, the coyote places the seed with some exotic fertilizer. It is essential that phenotypic traits be considered in biodiversity models since they constitute the link between an individual's fitness in each environment, biotic interactions, and evolutionary change. To advance towards more realism, model parameterization should build on the theory and applications of quantitative genetics, and on studies quantifying heritability of functional traits, or other fitness components. In this environment, think about the culture pinecones and how it is well adapted to this rocky, arid, and high elevation environment. This was not happenstance. It was a response to successfully navigate in this restrictive environment. Commensalism, amensalism, and parasitism join through a complex series of species interactions. In commensalism, one organism benefits while the other is unaffected. The opposite of commensalism is amensalism, where one organism is harmed while the other is unaffected. Parasitism is a relation between an organism in which one lives as a parasite on another. Symbiosis of amensalism is any type of a close and long-term biological interaction between two different biological organisms, be it mutualistic, commensalistic, or parasitic. The organisms, each termed a symbiont, must be of different species. Symbiosis can be obligatory, which means that one or more of the symbionts depend on each other for survival, or facultative, that is, optional, when they can generally live independently. Pacific lamprey belongs to a primitive group of fishes that are eel-like in form but lack the jaws and paired fins of true fishes. These species have a round, sucker-like mouth, no scales, and breathing holes instead of gills. Adult Pacific lamprey are characterized by the presence of 3 large teeth and posterior teeth in the oral disc. Lamprey are anadromous fishes, born in freshwater where they spend up to 7 years and grow. They migrate to the ocean. As adults in the marine environment, Pacific lamprey are parasitic and feed on a variety of hosts, including Pacific salmon, flatfish, rockfish, and pollock. They are preyed upon by sharks, sea lions, and other marine animals, including humans. After spending 1 to 3 years in the marine environment, Pacific lamprey cease feeding and migrate to fresh water. They are thought to overwinter and remain in the freshwater habitat for approximately 1 year before spawning, where they may shrink in size up to 20%. Most upstream migration takes place at night. Adult size at the time of migration ranges from about 15 to 25 inches. Pacific lamprey spawn in similar habitats to salmon, in gravel-bottomed streams at the upstream end of riffle habitat, typically above suitable young larvae, amocoate habitat. Both male and female lamprey participate to move the stones with their mouths to make a spawning bed.
They gave themselves up so that we could live on this world.
fish play an important role, and not just to the ecosystem, but play an important role in our life and our culture.
What you call lamprey, I guess I grew up hearing all of our old people call them eels.
He was a good food source. He was easy to catch. He was plentiful. Spiritually, he's one of us.
It was part of our daily life. It was part of our growing up. We just never thought of it, and maybe took it for granted that we would always have this rich natural resource available to us.
Lamprey were once very abundant in the entire Columbia Basin and tributaries of the Columbia Basin. They were known to be, their range extended all the way up into the headwaters of the Columbia, all the way in the upper Snake Basin. Now lamprey are only really present in the mid-Columbia and the lower Columbia River.
The decline in these animals over the past 20 years is astronomical.
They've been here for hundreds of millions of years, but it's only going to take 100 years to wipe them out.
In one short lifetime, in the whole, since the earth has begun, since these animals became available to us and became our brothers that took care of us, and in one short lifetime, they've almost disappeared.
How do we let something that's 450, 500 million years old go extinct? Shame on us, the whole bunch of us, for not paying attention to what was going on.
There are times that I worry that I would sure hate to see the extinction of a species in my lifetime.
People better realize what they're doing, because we are a big family. We are the circle. That's what life is about. We take care of one another. So when we have someone in trouble, that's where the rest of us have to step in. You want to see him? There he is. There he is. You want to meet my friend? We'll go to the dams. We pick the eels up. Take them inland where our home country is. We take them to the streams we want. We put them in the water. The rest is up to them. They amaze me. They are amazing creatures. They just my brother Eel's cool. He just flat cool.
Parasitic lamprey are part of the food web. They get their energy from other animals and are trophic-level participants. They may not be popular with many people, but to some, they are an indicator of the ecosystem imbalances we create. Be careful about those pesky labels we apply. We call this lamprey a parasite. All kinds of negative connotations are brought home. When you think about animals such as hookworms, lice, mosquitoes, and vampire bats, fungi such as honey fungus and the agents of ringworm, and plants such as mistletoe, if you are a salmon with that lamprey on your side, you will think poorly about those vampires. But a Nimipu or Yakima Indian may think of the lamprey as a brother. Their life is important too. Remember, no player is inconsequential, so don't treat them like they are. Alliopathy is the chemical inhibition of one plant or other organism by another, due to the release into the environment of substances acting as germination or growth inhibitors. Alliopathy is a biological phenomenon by which an organism produces one or more biochemicals that influence the germination, growth, survival, and reproduction of other organisms. These biochemicals are known as allochemicals and can have benefits or detrimental effects on the target organisms. Commensalism is a long-term biological interaction called symbiosis, in which members of one species gain benefits while those of the other species neither benefit nor are they harmed. Epiphytes are plants that grow on another plant but is not parasitic, such as the numerous ferns, bromeliads, air plants, and orchids growing on tree trunks in rainforests. An epiphyte is an organism that grows on the surface of a plant and derives its moisture and nutrients from the air, rain, water, or from debris accumulating around it. Epiphytes take part in nutrient cycles and add to both the diversity and biomass of the ecosystem in which they occur, like any other organism. They are an important source of food for many species. Typically, the older parts of the plant will have more epiphytes growing on them. Epiphytes differ from parasites in that epiphytes grow on other plants for physical support and do not necessarily negatively affect the host. Nurse plants are trees that protect smaller plants. Xeric environments can experience extreme high temperatures and extreme low temperatures. In these environments, nurse plants provide shaded microhabitats for the survival of several other plant species. Nurse plants provide a positive interaction between itself and the organisms in which it protects and are often crucial to maintaining biodiversity. Much of the classic ecological theory looking into the natural selection, niche separation, and metapopulation dynamics has focused on negative interactions such as predation and competition, but positive interactions, that is, facilitation, receives focus in ecological life. Dwarf mistletoe parasitism reduces the growth, seed production ability, and the lifespan of infected host trees. Most western conifer species are host to one or more species of dwarf mistletoe. The genus Archeuthobium, commonly called dwarf mistletoe, is a genus of 26 species of parasitic plants that parasitize members of trees in North America, Central America, Asia, Europe, and Africa. Of the 42 species, 39 are endemic to North America and 21 in the United States. They all have very reduced shoots and leaves, which really are reduced to scales, with the bulk of the plant living under the host's bark. Parasites are organisms that live on or in a host organism. The parasite benefits from this arrangement, but the host suffers as a result. Mistletoe grows with their roots spreading into the veins of the host tree to absorb nutrients and minerals. Biological dispersal refers to both the movement of individuals, that is, animals, plants, fungi, or bacteria, from their birth site to their breeding site. We simply call this natal dispersal, as well as the movement from one breeding site to another, otherwise called breeding dispersal. Dispersal is also used to describe the movement of propagules such as seed and spores. Now, technically, dispersal is defined as any movement that has potential to lead to gene flow. Keep that one alive. We are tracking genetic migration through time and across environments. This movement is described in several ways. Emigration of animals and plants is individuals moving out of a population or some subunit of it. Immigration is animals and plants moving into a population or some subunit of it. Migration describes patterns of animals' movement between areas within its home range, usually associated with seasonal cycles. Dispersal is also not to be confused with animal migration, although within the population genetics literature, the terms migration and dispersal are often used interchangeably. We will look into the animal migration of elk species, this time in the Cascade Mountain Range in Oregon, near Crater Lake. We land at Union Peak. Migration describes patterns of animal movement between areas within their home range, usually associated with seasonal cycles. Elk populations migrate en masse annually from their spring range to their summer range, then to a winter range, only to circle back to the calving territory before spring arrives. Density-dependent dispersal for foraging, or predator avoidance, is an obvious example. But there are more complex phenomena that can also impact species range dynamics and biodiversity patterns. Populations of Cervus canadensis share this annual migration trait. We see it here with the Rocky Mountain elk, Cervus canadensis variety Nasoni, in Montana. This migration is matched for the elk populations at Kamiak Butte in Washington's Olympics with Cervus canadensis variety Roosevelti, Roosevelt elk, near the Elwha River. As we progress out of this topic, keep the idea of movement alive in your perceptions about how species, populations, and communities develop. It is obvious when we look at the elk herd migrating on their annual trek from wintering to spring calving grounds, only to reverse the journey again in the fall. These are heritable traits passed between generations. This movement is easily seen in mammals like these, but also easily understood with Canada geese flying their annual flight paths, just like mallard ducks or those beautiful monarch butterflies. Movement expresses their genetic fundamentals. Expand this to those lamprey and salmon. Although they have no street signs, maps, or GPS units, they swim from their birth grounds on a trek swimming thousands of miles, only to return after 4 to 6 years to their natal place of birth. These events, their timing, and interactions all make genetic fitness to mesh into the genome realities we call an environmental fit. This explains how species fill their niche.